Hello Thistledown Gang, welcome back to my channel. If you've already been here, that is. If not, hi. It's fantastic to have you here. So glad you could make it. Please stay, and by that I mean subscribe. This is part 2 of the mini-series where I give a music box from the thrift store a makeover. Time for a recap. I put the thing on a new base, painted the inside and outside, put another piece of paperboard on top, painted it some more, and most importantly for this video, put a layer of primer on this little rat here, which brings us up to speed. Other than the music box, I didn't sand the figurine before smearing the gesso all over her. But these resin figurines are usually not entirely smooth to begin with, so the paint stuck without me having to be afraid to ruin her features by, dragging sandpaper over them. Just like with the music box itself, I went for muted colors rather than clear ones because I want the whole thing to have the dusty, kind of pseudo-antique feel of these 80s and 90s Edwardian revival kitsch things. I hope you know the type that I mean because it's very lovely and in a way very now, kind of. It's very cottagecore. I couldn't even use pure white for her tights, I wanted something a bit more off-white. It might not seem like much, but in the end this actually does a lot for the overall impression. It's just those little details. To take some of the saturation out of the paint and make it more air quotes dusty, I use white, raw umber and complementary colors according to what I want. Sometimes mustard yellow also helps, especially with the pink I had in mind for the tutu and the whole ballet outfit in general, that I wanted to wear into something I call the antique apricot territory. Raw umber is such a neat color to work with. It keeps colors warm when darkening them, and it's exactly the hair color I had in mind for my little rat here. Well, she's probably not a patira. She doesn't look like she goes to the école de danse of the Paris Opera. That would be a lot of stress, and I don't want her to go through all of that. Maybe she sometimes dreams of it, but there are so many other things to do and so many adventures to be had, and a more rigorous training schedule would interfere with that. Also, look at that. Her tights have a hole because she had an adventure just before her lessons, and while a local dance teacher isn't exactly thrilled already by this, a trainer at the Paris Opera would never let her through the door looking like this in the first place. I went for a lighter shade of pink on the underside of the tutu to make the airiness of the delicate layers more visible. Now that the basic color scheme is set, I can finally go on to the fun part. To liven up her face, hands and arms, I mixed the base colors of tutu and skin respectively and started painting it on in very thin layers. It might take a while, but it's worth the patience to do it this way rather than blend it out, which I also do sometimes, don't get me wrong, but this method yields a luminescence that blending just doesn't do. I really need to work on my filming angles. You'll probably see more of my hair in this video than you ever cared for. Her eyes have the same color as the box itself, just to tie everything together a bit more. Even if it's just such a little detail. Actually, little details are better than large components, in my opinion. And I almost left them without pupils, just because that is what I usually do with my drawings, but I couldn't tell you why, I just like it that way. Dab dab dab, flower crown, dab dab dab, dab dab. Now back to the adventure this little ballerina had before class. It's obvious that she had to climb the tree or crawl under somewhere, and in the process scraped her knee. But her bestie usually knows what she's up to, and so they carry spare plasters everywhere to stick all over her before the lesson starts. I pretty early on decided that she'd have freckles. The secret to painting freckles is using a lot of water instead of just paint, so they'll stay somewhat see-through and natural, at least that's what I found. This also applies to makeup, not just acrylics, where this is the most realistic option, and the second most realistic option is just using different colors of eyebrow pencil. I know that because I tested. Oh yeah, this was one of the moments where I thought, oh great, you completely fluffed it up. And then I thought that again when I cited the video material for this episode, and also when I edited it again and again and again. Even though I knew that it would be okay in the end, so don't worry, all will be fine. As with the minions in my overlord shelf, which in hindsight I should have named the overboard, I did the placement of the pupils half off camera because they already stressed me out enough without having to check if I'm in view. But you get to see the detailing. Now let's muss up that hair a bit, because those brambles will snack at your bun and the wind will mess with it, and untidiness just is the price of adventure. Now I never quite explained why this is a mini-series rather than just a video. For the sake of my own already dwindling sanity, I decided to release videos on big projects like this one in parts, rather than one big tour de force. The sheer amount of video material things like this music box generate tend to intimidate me so much that I often end up not editing and thus just not showing them to you at all. This leads to frustration on my and long upload pauses on my channel's part, and also you don't get to see anything, and so you'll get some of my projects in smaller servings from now on. Don't worry, there will still be start to finish videos as well, and I might not even release all of the parts after another if something more self-contained comes along and charmingly inserts itself into my schedule. We'll just see, but I have a good feeling about this. I had a real blast thinking up all these tiny details that make her more than just a pretty little figurine. As much as I like coming up with broader concepts, the detail work is where I feel most comfortable and in the flow. A few dots here, faked here, there, some more blush, a loose strand of hair. It's basically styling a character for their first step onto a stage. I mean, look at this ladder! I think that's one of the details I'm most proud of, maybe aside from the plaster and the freckles, because the tier would have worked without it, but it's just so much better with the addition. I haven't mentioned her chair at all so far, because it was one of the least interesting things for me about the whole process. I painted the cushion one colour and the legs another, and then gave the former a lighter wash and the latter a darker brush, and that was essentially that, aside from the cord that runs around it, but that we'll see in a minute or two. It's a pity that I apparently forgot to press the record button on that, but I actually gave the dress, skin and shoes a darker pink wash sometime in between the last scene and this one. You can see some of that here, just to give the legs and those flowers a bit more depth instead of having them look just fused together, which I mean they essentially are, but you know what I mean. The watered down paint settles in the folds and the nooks and crannies and makes it all come to life a bit more, as well as making it look older and, I don't know, more real in a way. I also painted a darker stripe around the skirt and painted over the shoe ribbons, But I couldn't find footage of that anywhere either. This stuff here is my favorite gold paint so far, and I used it on the rope that runs along the seat. It has pretty good pigmentation and it's easily darkened with a bit of raw umber or black, depending on how warm you want your antique gold to look, and I used that for a bit of shading. These buttons here would be an absolute pain to do up. My headcanon is that she just squeezes and wriggles herself in there, and every now and again a button pops off and she has to go to a Gran to get it sewn back on, and then Gran raises her brow at this, but does it anyway. And that's the little rat for now. Onto Odette. Please ignore that acrylic marker, that was a mistake and did not work, and nobody has to waste any time watching that. Being the bone I had to pick with this music box in the first place, this girl definitely needs a makeover. First of all, with the song of the music box being the main theme of Swan Lake, her dress has to be white. It's Swan Lake, not Flamingo Lake. And look, Odette gets the same raw umber hair as a little rat. She also gets some loose strands of same hair. Wait, could it be that this is a daydream of the little rat dancing on the big stage? Oh yes, I feel incredibly clever for this one. And now we have the beginning of what I did to that face. I darkened the lashes and painted on incredibly impressive eyebrows and started with a blush, this time of the blending out variety, because layering at that scale was something I didn't really feel up to in that very moment. And then suddenly the face is done and I once again have no idea where the footage went. I fear I'll have to paint more tiny things at some point just to prove to myself that I'm able to retain video material of me doing just that. But aside from the pink tutu, what bothered me most about this Odette in here was that she wasn't wearing the traditional Swan Lake main character headpiece. It's been this very distinctive feather situation at least since the 1930s, and I couldn't possibly have a figure in there on the main stage, if you will, that didn't pay homage to that. I didn't reference a specific design here, it's really just an homage, as the classic thing that just goes along the face and swoops back along the side of the head would probably just have looked goofy without an amount of detail that I couldn't possibly provide on something so tiny. Instead I just went for a pretty feather thing, which is better than no Swanish headpiece at all. The flower at the base got the same color scheme as the ballet equipment of the little rat, and the base, her stage essentially, is the same color as the seat of the girl. I just like it so much when everything ties together. And now the acrylic marker gets to do something after all, as does my inability to stay within view for detail work. And, in the name of tying things together, once again, I'm getting out the gold paint for a few tiny accents. Originally, I toyed with the thought of putting actual lace over the skirt to get another texture in there, but I had nothing that delicate and slim, so in the end I just settled for golden dabs along the hem and the neckline. And this accent brings us to the end of this episode of the miniseries. Next time we'll have a look at the shockingly empty sides of that box, because we can't possibly have that. Until then, I wish you a wonderful time and a lovely winter solstice, or whatever holidays you celebrate or don't celebrate. Farewell.